Hello, and today we're going to be talking about productivity. And here with me is Jo Dodds of powertolivemore.com. And Jo is a coach and consultant around the area of productivity and well-being. So welcome, Jo.
Thanks for having me here, Paula. It's great to be here.
So do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So as you say, I'm a coach and consultant around productivity and well-being with Power to Live More. Aside from that, I'm also a corporate coach around employee engagement, and I do various other bits and pieces that I don't really tell anyone about. So I have a lot going on, hence probably why I focus on productivity, so that I can get it all done. And Power to Live More came about really because when I first started my business, I just did too much. I still do too much, but I did too much, and I was always focused on doing it all for the future. And I had a number of things. I had a medical issue myself and people in the family who sadly died of cancer. And I realized that I needed to sort of live now, not live for the future, if you like. And so Power to Live More is all about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. And the power is productivity, organization, well-being, energy and resilience. And that's really the sort of the theme, the ethos of what I talk about with people. And I do that through my membership site. So I work with home-based coaches and consultants.
Okay, so obviously sustainability sounds a bit of a odd subject to talk about in an interview. But actually it's really important whether you are applying for jobs, because it may well be a long haul for you and you're going to need that stamina and resilience to keep going. Or if you're starting a business, I mean, you know, both Jo and I know that in the early days the creativity is all exciting and it keeps you going and people are like, oh, what are you doing now? But after a while, once it's, you know, fairly established, you know, you've just got to keep on going with it, and you need that sustainability. So this interview today is going to help you whether you are on the job search or you are, you know, starting your own business. So I know from a previous conversation, you very much tie sustainability into energy and choosing the right thing in the first place, don't you? Tell me a little bit about that and why it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started with Power to Live More, I wanted to work on a structure that I'd be able to use with my students and clients. And I started to look at 4 areas initially, and that was around simplifying. So being really clear about what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and then sort of aligning your life and your business with that. Systemizing, so working out what processes and things that you need to do to get stuff done and get stuff done with ease is my sort of philosophy. Sharing, which is about getting other people involved, whether that's in outsourcing if you've got a business, or whether it's just getting people in your life to help you, delegating, getting people to even help you at home if you're starting a business, or even, you know, on a job search and need some time to do that. And self-care, so that bit about, you know, really looking after yourself, keeping those energy levels high and so on. But it was interesting that actually I realized quite early on that there was an element missing, and that element for me was actually sustain. So I think you came up with using that word for the interview, but actually it's one of my 5 fundamentals. And that was because I realized that it's a bit like, you know, when you sort of declutter, you can sort of spend 2 days like pulling your house to pieces, getting rid of stuff, tidying it up, and that junk drawer looks perfect, doesn't it, for like 24 hours. But actually, unless you have some strategies and some way of keeping those things happening and tidy and so on, you end up having to do it all again in sort of 6 months' time, because you haven't sustained that change that you've implemented. So I realized it was something that I needed to build into the structure that I use. And for me, it's very much about routines and rituals and creating that sort of way of being able just to keep doing things consistently and keep your energy levels up to do that. And again, it's all intertwined. It goes back to creating, you know, processes that mean you can just do stuff without thinking about it, or you can just keep going with something, you know, things like if you think about applying for a job, you know, if you've got your CV really well done and then you just tweak it for each of the jobs, you're not sort of starting from scratch each time. It's a lot less energy required to do that, and it gives you more energy to really put in your personality for that particular opportunity. And you know, again, with your business, I've got sort of loads of things that I do within my business, like sharing content online, for example, with a process where I just click a few buttons on my phone and it all just happens because I've got it set up in an automated way, because I knew that if I had to, you know, build the energy to do that every day, it wasn't going to happen. So I've created a way that it gets done, and then I can focus my actual energy on, you know, creativity and doing, you know, new stuff, or working with my clients or whatever. And I think whatever you do, like I said, going back to the decluttering sort of example, if you don't build in a way to sustain things, a way to keep those energy levels going, then it inevitably drops, because that's, you know, just how we are as people, really. And, you know, with your studying and background, you know more about that than I do.
Yeah. So stepping back a little bit, so those processes are great when you know what you're doing, but it's really important to get, you know, your wants and desires aligned with what's, you know, what your goal is going
Yes,
to be. Any
absolutely.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, so again, you know, thinking back to where my business came from in the first place, we often end up going down a route that feels or seems like the right thing at the time. Maybe it doesn't even feel like the right thing, it just seems like the right thing. And we sort of start doing something, and then all sorts of other things come in and influence that, and we, you know, we pick up other tasks and we do things slightly differently. And, you know, sometimes we stop and sort of look back and think, hang on a minute, I didn't actually want to be doing this. And that applies to, you know, starting a business. I know, you know, you and I have changed our businesses, you know, regularly sort of thing over the last however long. And, you know, at the time they felt like the right thing for us. But actually, as the sort of environment changes, and as our needs and our abilities and, you know, our education, everything else changes, then that is a time for us to review and look and get really clear again on what is going to work for us. And it's the same if you're looking for a job. You know, my background was corporate in retail HR, and retail was my thing. I sort of dabbled in leisure and sort of hospitality, but I didn't ever go into, you know, banking or anything else, because I just knew that wasn't the place for me. So it's interesting that, you know, we can talk about people starting businesses, we can also talk about people looking for a job, and actually there's so many similarities. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but, you know, it's about being really clear about who you are, what you are good at, what you really enjoy doing, what you know, consistently can see yourself doing. You know, it's all well and good. Sometimes we have, you know, skills and abilities to really put that effort into doing something once, but actually to keep doing that every week, it might be too energy draining for us. It might just be too difficult. It might be, you know, that it takes all of our resources to do it, and just to keep doing that isn't going to work for us. So, you know, it's something about getting really clear. And I think, you know, part of the reason why we're where we are now is because we've had all this experience. You know, we've known each other probably 12 years or so, and, you know, how much has changed in our businesses and in our lives in that time. And it's much easier, you know, as we know, as you get older, to look back and think, oh, should have done this sooner, sort of thing. But, you know, that whole wisdom thing comes in. But it's about being really clear about, you know, what we're good at, what we can see ourselves doing, what's going to earn us enough money, whether that be in business or in a job, you know, what type of people we want to work with, what we want to be doing on a sort of daily basis, and so on, and then sort of building around that. And it's difficult when you're looking for a job. Well, I think it's the same starting a business. If you need some money, you sort of end up doing what you need to do to get that. And you know, you can end up in situations where you're not enjoying it, but it's bringing in the money. And that's, I think, one of the difficulties for a lot of people. How do you break that? Because, you know, it's a sort of real leap of faith, isn't it, in many cases. But I think it's about constantly reviewing that and being aware. So, okay, you might be doing something you don't really want to do, but at least knowing that and keeping your eyes and ears open for what could be the next thing, I think is you know, really key. But I do think a lot of people don't think about that. If you talk to people about what, you know, what does your perfect day look like, most people probably can't really tell you. If, you know, if you say, let's carve out a load of extra time for you every week, what are you going to do with it? Many people can't tell you because they don't have any time to do those things, so they haven't really thought about it. So it's really important to, you know, really understand yourself, get really clear about what you want, and then what you don't want, even more important, I think, and then align to that. But also to keep reviewing and reflecting on that, and knowing that you can change. It's not, you know, a problem to do something different. That's actually a you know, healthy way to be, that you can respond to what's going on and how you're feeling and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I see it with my career coaching clients. there's quite a marked difference between somebody that's big picture thinking and, you know, likes making plans and so on, and there's somebody who's quite small detail, who loves spreadsheets, and, you know, sometimes needs must, but somebody who's big picture and creative, trying to shoehorn themselves into a job where they're going to be manipulating figures on a spreadsheet all day, yeah, they might get that job in the short term, but long term they're not going to be happy.
No, exactly. And I do think we delude ourselves often. I think, you know, I've done it. A couple of years ago, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to set up this program and it's going to look like this, and I'm going to have all these elements and things to it. And I didn't do it. And I've sort of coined a phrase, productive procrastination, because you spend a period of time not doing something and you get really annoyed with yourself that you've not done it. And you think it's because you're, you know, just procrastinating, you're not motivated enough, you're lazy, whatever. You know, we tell ourselves all these awful things, don't we, about our capabilities.
Voices.
And then you realize it's not what you wanted in the first place. So this is what happened with that. I thought about this program, I'd got all the sort of bells and whistles, and then I did nothing about it, you know, castigating myself for sort of, if that's the word, I don't know if I've ever used that word before, for not taking action, and then sort of woke up and realized that I didn't want to do it anyway, and that's obviously why I hadn't taken the action.
Inner wisdom.
Yes, exactly. And I do think some of those pauses can be really helpful, and as I say, there's such a, I think one of the, you know, the benefits of the current situation has been that a lot of people have had to pause. And, you know, often people say that the, you know, being made redundant, losing a job in whatever way is the best thing that happened to many people. And, you know, I can say that myself. I ended up leaving a job under not very nice circumstances at all, actually. And I went into interim work as a result of it. And then I started a business after that. And it was almost like I'm not going to find myself in that situation again. I'm going to take responsibility and do something different. And so for me, it was one of those, you know, it turned out to be the best thing. At the time, it was awful, you know, traumatic. It took a good couple of years to sort of lose that pain of it, if you like. And so I think this is giving people an opportunity to pause and to think. And that's a good thing, because I think we run too quickly. We make decisions too quickly, you know, under normal circumstances. And so actually having that reflection time, I think, is really important. So with that reflection time, you know, get really clear about what you want to do, where you want to do it, who you want to do it with, and then work out a way to make that happen.
Yeah. And I like your point about, you know, you had this program, all the bells and whistles, you obviously had planned it out, but you didn't do it. And in the end, you realized that, you know, it actually wasn't what you want. And I see that again and again. And I often say to people who come to me and they go, oh, I should be doing this. And, you know, if you're not doing it, you probably don't want to do it. You know, if you really wanted to do it, if it was something that lit your fire, you would be there doing it. You would be there sending those applications out, you know, researching the company.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing it, then just, as you say, pause and listen to your inner wisdom and think, why aren't I doing it? And it might be that there's something else in your life that's very pressing, but you know, it may well be that actually you don't want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, let's not forget there could be that whole thing about sort of imposter syndrome, worrying that we're not going to be able to do it well enough and all that other stuff. And so, as you say, pausing and thinking and reflecting and getting other people perhaps to reflect with you allows you to see, is it that, or is it, as we've just said, something that you just actually really don't want to do, but you think you should, you know, or is it that there's a confidence thing in there, in which case that's a different scenario, and that's for a different interview. But but yeah, take those moments to reflect and get really clear about, you know, what are your values, who do you want to work with, you know, have they got the same values, all of that sort of stuff, and then, as I say, work out a way to get to that place. And it's not going to be easy in lots of cases, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, and I am seeing a lot of people who are coming to me now who they are looking for something. You know, you mentioned values, they're looking for something more meaning, more purpose, and they're choosing to use their redundancy as a way to propel them into that. So, okay, let's assume that, you know, you've taken that pause, you've looked at your values, you've either come up with a business that fulfills those values, or, you know, found an area of work that excites you. So I mentioned earlier about, you know, job hunting or setting up a business is long haul. or could be long haul job hunting, and we are going to need those systems. I know, you know, I have colleagues who use things like Trello. I know you're very well, often every time I speak to you, there's a new sort of pet little thing that you're using, and
Yeah.
you know, I still have my file of facts.
So
And I love all these, you know, journals and notebooks and planners and things. But I mean, this is what you talk to people about. So over the years, you must have sort of discovered some favorites and things which really work. So
I have.
with us.
I would respond to those comments. Firstly, about you know, your choice is that it is all very individual. So, you know, some productivity people sort of do the whole, this is the process and this is what you must follow and it's step by step and everything else. And, you know, I never do that because everyone's different. And, you know, we were reflecting before we started recording that you've been on my podcast a couple of times, and, you know, you, in common with 173 other people out of 177 interviews, have all said pen and paper is pretty much the main thing that you use. You use other apps and systems and stuff, but, you know, you return to and love your pen and paper. I'm one of the ones who doesn't. I never use pen and paper. So that's why I've got all these apps and things in my head. But it does come down to, you know, what suits you yourself. And you know, so take advice, you know, find out from people, and I'll share a few in a moment. But fundamentally, it's still about trying it out and seeing if it works for you, and if it feels right. Again, it goes back to what we've been saying all along, you know, does it feel like something that feels right for you? And if not, go somewhere else. You talked about your colleague using Trello, and I don't like Trello because I don't do sort of visuals. So you know, that whole concept of having columns and moving things, the Kanban stuff, it just doesn't appeal to me. I like lines. I'm into linear, so I use Asana because it has the projects listed in a list, because I like lists. So really, I do like pen and paper, just on a computer, if you see what I mean. So, you know, just be aware that there's loads of different things that you could be using, but it's about whether it works for you. But, you know, give it time, because some things might feel a bit difficult to use to begin with, and until you've tried it and tested it and so on, you won't know. So I don't know, let's start. Todoist I use for my to-do list, and I've used it consistently. So it's funny you hold up your file of facts. I've used everything over the years, you know, file of facts, Scion, HPI Pack, various other written, Franklin Covey, all of it. And part of it is that I used to love organizing myself. So I'd, you know, swap to a new type of organizer, and I'd reorganize how I was going to, you know, be organized. And I would waste so much time doing that because I love organising myself.
I was about to say, is that a form of procrastination? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I've mentioned on a couple of podcasts recently a profound statement that I had from one of my team, my last corporate role. My HR manager once said to me, if you spent as much time doing the work as organising it, you'd be even brilliant, you know, even better, sort of thing. And I thought, oh, that's an insult, really, isn't it?
A backhanded compliment. Yeah.
No, but she's still my friend, so you know, it was well received from me. But I do remember it on a regular basis. But it's interesting that since I moved to Todoist years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I haven't moved anywhere else. And I know part of the reason is, apart from the fact that it's a good, robust tool, is that it's got so many Todoists. It's an app, yeah. So you can have it on your computer and on all your devices, and it syncs. But it's really simple. It's literally, you can do a to-do list and tick stuff off. You can have projects, you can use labels, so sort of tags, and then you can create filters. And that's what's kept me there, because every time I get a bit bored and want to reorganize myself, like I was looking yesterday and thinking, I've got so many tasks that say they're going to take me 10 minutes, you know, like a whole page and a half of them, that I never start any of them because it feels like 3 days work and I haven't got time to do that. So I need to find a way to split that list into a shorter list. So I'm sure in the next few days I'll find a new filter to enable me to make it into a smaller list, because I slice and dice my to-do list, and that enables me to do that. So something like Todoist, automation, things like Zapier, if you've used that. So if I read a lot of articles, and most of my social media activity, apart from a bit of chatting is actually just sharing the articles. It's not ideal because I ought to be sharing them in the moment, having a discussion and all that sort of stuff. You know, I used to be a social media consultant, as you know, so I know what I'm supposed to do, but I know that I won't do it because I haven't got the time or the inclination a lot of the time. But I do like to share useful content with my audience. So I have a whole system set up using Pocket, which is an app that you can use to share articles. You know that thing where you open all the tabs on your computer because you've got articles you want to read and you think I'll read those later, and then at the end of the day you shut all the tabs down and that's it, it's all gone.
Yeah.
So
I have one open now actually.
Well,
I'm going to check out later.
Yeah. So you can click on your Pocket little app in your toolbar, and it will add the article to your Pocket account. And then when you're at an idle moment, you want to read those articles, you can just go onto your phone or onto your computer or iPad or whatever. I have it set up through Zapier to my Buffer account, which means that if I tag articles with certain tags, it'll go into Buffer, which will then add it to a queue of social media shares, and I tag it depending on what it is. So if I tag it with podcast, it'll share my podcast and it's written so it says my latest podcast. If I tag it with Twitter, it'll just go to Twitter. If I tag it with Power to Live More members, it'll go to my membership site. So it just means that I can read, tap, job done, and it's going to go. So as I said, it's not ideal because I ought to be commenting on it and all that sort of stuff, but at least I'm getting that sort of useful content out to my audience.
The Pocket you could use if you were job hunting. You could use that as a way of collecting articles around your industry and then sort of having a read up on the way to the interview. That's
a really good piece of advice actually, and I did that once in a podcast, so slightly different application but same process. I was being interviewed on a podcast about LinkedIn, and whilst we were talking I looked on Pocket and I searched LinkedIn on my Pocket account because I've got, you know, thousands probably of articles on there, and a whole list of articles came up, and I was clicking through them as we were talking because it wasn't video, so I could get away with that. And I was sort of going, oh yes, because there was a recent article that said that 25% of people blah 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 blah, so I sounded like really knowledgeable, like I'd done a load of research, but it was, you know, literally in the moment. And but yeah, as you say, if you're going for a job interview, you can find resources and just, you know, throw them into your Pocket account, and that's really, you know, job done from that. And that reminds me of Evernote or Microsoft OneNote, and there's a number of other tools like that, which is basically an online notebook. So like you get your actual notebooks out. I do still use a notebook, but I use it on my computer and on all my devices. And in fact, when I spoke to you about this interview and I made some notes, I just opened a note in Evernote and typed straight into that. And then last night I thought, oh, I ought to think a bit about this interview. So I was on my computer, so I added a few more notes. And then this morning I got up and I was on my phone, so I had a quick look at that. And so see, I did prepare. But, you know, I put meeting notes, I save instruction manuals into there so that I don't have to keep them in the house, memories, anything that I need to refer to, things like we've got a caravan, we're going camping next week for a week, and I can never remember how long it is when I'm booking it into a pitch, so I've literally got a note that says caravan, it's got all the technical specifications, so I can just look that up. So some people call it your second brain. I think Evernote can be used to keep all those things that you need to refer to, but you don't have to keep them swimming around in your head. So again, from a sort of job hunt point of view, you could create a notebook around a particular role or a particular company or a particular part of your job hunt process, and then just throw, you know, information. You can put audio on it, images, links, you can clip articles to it. So that's something to think about. There's a, you know, it's a freemium, so there's a free option, and then you can upgrade if you need further functionality. Yeah, so there's that. Email management. I use Gmail. I used to use Outlook, and I hated Gmail to begin with because you can't organize it in the same way as Outlook in terms of the order of the emails, but you very quickly do get used to it if you change. There's a tool that I use called SaneBox, and that is a paid for tool, but what it does is it organizes all the emails into various folders rather than all just being in your inbox, so that when you have time to look at your emails, you can just go in and find just the really important ones, and perhaps you can have all the sort of news ones in a separate folder, and you know, if you're job hunting, you could put all your application responses in a different folder and so
You
on.
will get loads of emails once you start
Yes,
like replying via
exactly.
Indeed and so on. You just get hundreds coming in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can use it. It automatically does it, and then you can sort of train it. But you can also, if you go in and set it up, you can have it set up with specific folders. So you could have like a read folder and a Indeed folder and whatever, and then it would just automatically send all your emails there, and you could check them all in one go, rather than, you know, that bit where you're trying to go through emails and it's tedious because you've got, you know, people talk about we shouldn't multitask, because actually it's not multitasking, it's just switching quickly between tasks, and actually it's very energy draining.
Yeah.
If you actually corral all your emails into different folders, you can sort of get into the right headspace for that particular task, if you like. So I'm going to look at job ads, I'll go to these folders. I'm going to respond to applications, I need my inbox. I'm going to read some newsletters and research, I'll go to my newsletter folder. So it's a good way of you know, using a process to create that sort of you know, way of dealing with stuff that keeps the energy high at those times, or when you haven't got very high energy, check your newsletters, because that's, you know, a low energy task.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a bit in here about recognizing when your energy is high or low. I know for me, first thing in the morning, I like a bit of a sort of an easy, lazy sort of time until about 10, and then I'm ready.
Yes.
So that, you know, that, what was it? Eat your frog first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Eat your frog at lunchtime, Paula. Yeah, exactly. It's so important. And again, it's something that when I was in corporate and did, you know, 9 to 5 and everything, when I first started my business, I did sort of, I was going to always say 9 to 5. It was probably more like, you know, 9 till midnight or something. But you know, you start thinking you've got to run your business the same as the general world runs their business, and actually you don't. It's your own business. You can do what you like. And over the years, I've realised that I am really a night bird. So when I used to be in corporate, everyone else was leaving at 5. I'd stay for sort of 2-3 hours in the evening in the office because it was quiet, and you know, I was just sort of warming up as they were all going, and I thought it was because I wasn't very organised. I spent too long organising myself and not enough time doing my job. I now realise it was my best time for working. So, you know, I'd be fine during the day and, you know, when people were around and talking and everything else, but my real energy was in the evening. So it was all, you know, skewed, not right for me. So now in my own business, like you say, I don't do stuff in the morning generally. I certainly don't work with clients. And, you know, I know that I work into the night a lot, but then in the day I do other things. So organising what you do around your energy levels is really key, and being really aware of that. Obviously in a job you can't always do that, but then, you know, when you're thinking about what job do you want and where do you want to work, that ought to be part of that consideration. You know, for me, if I went into a job now, there's no chance I could start at 6 o'clock in the morning, because it just doesn't suit me, and I know that now. I didn't know that in the past, but you know, now I know that, I'd have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. So looking for something flexible working might suit some people now.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing to think about is lots of taking breaks, whether that's, you know, from your office or if you're in a you know, a business environment, working out how you can not just keep sort of focusing. And it's interesting, having worked from home for a long time, I've, you know, had a sort of routine, a way of doing that. But it was interesting when my husband started working from home at the beginning of lockdown, how he didn't want to work from home, and he thought it was going to be awful. And I think actually it's been really good for him. But to begin with, it was awful, because he just sat and just worked like constantly for hours. And I kept having to remind him that he could just get up and go make a drink and wander around and, you know, tidy his office, or, you know, I don't know, go and talk to his mum who lives next door. And of course he couldn't do that in the office environment, and he wasn't supposed to or encouraged to do that. So but he did, because that's what you do in an office when you've got lots of people around you. You just naturally end up wandering over to someone's desk or going to the loo and chatting to someone on the way. Of course, that wasn't happening here. So his focus was absolutely just on the work. So, you know, things improved for him when he started to, you know, work in batch time, if you like, and then break in the middle. And one of the tools that you can use for that is the Pomodoro technique.
I was about to say that, because you were the one that taught it to me years ago.
And, you know, that's where you work for a period of time. And the sort of, when it was invented by something like Frank Cirillo or something, it was 25 minutes of focused work, and then a 5-minute break, and then 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, and then a longer break, so like a 25-minute break or whatever. And I think there's so many reasons that is a really good thing to do, because it can help keep you focused. It can help avoid the distractions that we're also you know, in front of all the time in our lives nowadays, what with our phones and our notifications and everything else. But also if you're, you know, procrastinating on something and you don't want to get started, knowing you're only going to spend 25 minutes on it, you know, can be a bit of a motivation as well. Or you could just do 10 minutes and that could be your period of time, and then you have a little break. But getting up and moving around, having drinks, you know, chatting to people, that's all important in terms of being able to then refocus. And actually, even if you use the Pomodoro technique all day, you're probably only going to get 4, maybe 6 at the very most of those sessions properly done, because that's just the nature of you know, the ebb and flows of our days and our energy and so on. But it can be really useful, and there's loads of apps that can help you. I mean, you could just simply get a timer on your phone. You can get the tomato timer, because that's the whole point. It's tomato, Pomodoro in Italian. I've recently started using one called Pom Done, and that syncs across everything, and it actually syncs with, it's only the paid version though, it syncs with your to-do list. So I have all my to-do items on there, and I can go in and work through those during those sort of focus periods. And I think there's an option to shut off all the distracting you know, things that pop up on your computer. And at the risk of just waffling on, I've just thought of another one. Focus at will is something that enables you can use that for Pomodoro, but also it's something where it plays music and it times you, and it has really nice pictures on the screen and so on. So you can use that to try and focus yourself on, you know, a particular task for a period of time, but then to make sure that at the end of it you have a break and you go and do something different.
I know one thing that works for me is almost gamifying it too. It's like, okay, so I've got 25 minutes. Let's see how much of this article I can write, or let's see how many emails I can get off that list.
Yes, well, that's one of the reasons I started with Pom Done. That was only a few weeks ago, because I do tag all my tasks with how long I think they might take. And then often they take longer than I tagged them with. And it's as much as anything else because I haven't got a deadline to it. So, you know, we all know before we go on holiday in our business or in our jobs, we often get loads more done on the last day than we've done for the last 3 weeks, because all of a sudden we've got this like absolute deadline to achieve, and somehow it all, you know, happens. And obviously we don't want to work at that level all the time. But exactly what you said, the sort of gamification, the sort of challenge to do something by a deadline can help us to get more done, and more done quickly, you know, more quickly. So that's a good one. The other thing I mentioned before is about rituals, routines and rituals. So, you know, some people use that whole thing about doing something on a daily basis and checking it off. So it's questionable whether it really was Seinfeld, the comedian, but he supposedly wrote a joke every day and he had to tick it off on a chart on his wall, and he set up a streak. So, you know, you get to the stage where you've done it for 7 or 10 or 20 days, you don't want to break that streak. And again, there's loads of apps you can use for that. One of the ones I use on my membership site is Habit Share, because you can share it with your friends as well, so that they can keep you accountable for whatever those sort of daily actions are. And the other thing, without it being so structured, is at the moment I'm trying to eat in a keto way, and I was being, you know, yes, on and off and a bit sort of lax about it. And I've ended up creating a sort of routine or ritual, which is that I weigh myself in the morning with my new scales and an app. And then in the evening, this is too much information, I weigh on my stick to find out if I've got ketones. And then I've got magnesium that I want to take, and I wasn't remembering to take it at different times, so I take that before bed now, because I checked out whether that was okay, and it is. And my other supplements, it's fine too. So I've created this thing. It's almost like, you know, without having to tick it off anywhere, I know that first thing I do in the morning is weigh myself, because I'm measuring the trend, not because I'm actually bothered about what I weigh particularly. And once a month I'm measuring everything just to see if there's a difference, because it's motivating me to keep eating the way that I want to eat. So as I say, it's not about particularly end result, it's about a process. And what can I do to keep that process going? And every day when I think, oh, I'm going to go and eat, you know, some licorice, because I've discovered some very lovely licorice from Denmark. I don't, because I know I'm not supposed to, and it's going to ruin my routine. So I do think, you know, if it's about exercising, or, you know, doing particular things in your business, or even applying for jobs, you know, when you're not getting those jobs and you're struggling in terms of motivation, just knowing that every day you have to spend 5 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour doing some work on it, creates that sort of vacuum, if you like, that you then have to fill by doing the work. And then, you know that you've done your job, if you like, for the day.
And I think the beauty of that is, if you have the processes, you know, okay, 3 job applications a day, for instance, there is a sense of achievement, regardless of whether you get those jobs or not.
Yes.
So that's really important, isn't it? That ongoing sense of achievement.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, in all of our lives, whether it's business, jobs, personal lives, whatever, there's always a potential to feel like it's never ending, that however much you do, it's never enough. And, you know, we don't always stop and look back and see how far we've come, or see the results of the efforts we've put in. And, you know, having that, as you say, that sort of structure, so that even if you don't do any more that day, you've done what you committed to doing, is a big tick, you know. It's, you know, as you say, and even if it's not resulted in a job at the end of it, or a new client or whatever, the fact that you've achieved that, and that's what you set out to do, is in itself sort of motivational. But again, as I say, it's that the momentum of keeping going. And there's a brilliant book called The Slight Edge, and it talks about how if you just keep doing little small things every day, and, you know, just to talk about sort of weight as an example, if you keep eating rubbish every day, you don't see it in the day. It's not like you eat badly and then the next day suddenly you're, you know, massive or whatever. But if you keep doing it consistently for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, you will see a difference in your body. And so many of the things that we want to achieve fall foul to that, which is that we can't see in the moment. I mean, I used to say when I was young and I was doing diets, which I don't do now, but I used to go, oh, I haven't lost any weight in 24 hours. I'm not doing it anymore. It doesn't work. But of course, it doesn't work like that, does it? But, you know, there's so many things where we have to just keep consistently doing really small things, and then it makes a big difference, and it goes that way. Whereas if we keep doing small bad things, or we don't do the things at all, it goes that way. And the book talks about how literally taking small daily actions compounds. You know, we know in finance, compounding is really important. It's the same, you know, in our life and in our activity. So the more you can do those little things every day, the more it builds and builds to where you want to be.
Yeah. So we talked about getting aligned, so working out what it is that we want. Talked about creating systems and processes, being productive, and those systems and processes will make it easier, stamina-wise, and for us to sustain it. So I suppose that the other missing bit that we haven't spoken about is the well-being side. And I know this is a massive topic, and we've touched upon it a little bit, talking about, you know, getting up every now and again when your tomato goes off for a break. But I mean, are there any sort of non-negotiables that you think are really important on the well-being side?
Well, it's funny, you know, this goes back right to the beginning of the interview, where for me it's about getting clear about what you want and where you want to be, and trying to make that happen. Because when I'm talking in the corporate space about employee engagement, well-being is a massive part of that, as you can imagine. And a lot of people focus on what I'd say are the sort of bells and whistles, the sort of tactics, you know, let's have fruit in the canteen every week, and, you know, let's have a step challenge and all that sort of stuff. And if you do that, and then you have really rubbish management and leadership, and you're not treating people right, and you're not treating people individually, and it's, you know, you've not got the right strategy in the organization, you're not communicating, all of that stuff, regardless of all those sort of lovely health focused things that are happening, people's well-being is not going to be great. And it's the same, you know, personally, that you know, if you just don't end up where you want to be, you know, if you end up in a job or a position or a situation that you didn't want to be in, and you let that keep happening to you, however many steps you do and however well you eat or whatever, your whole well-being will be affected by it. So, you know, I think the starting point is what we said right at the beginning about getting really clear about what you want, and doing everything you can to be in that place, because that's, you know, absolutely fundamental. But then, yeah, it's the usual thing I talk about, you know, eating well, whatever that might look like for you. You know, moving, sleep. I'm just reading that Matthew Syed, I think his name is, book about sleep, Why We Sleep, which I've had for ages, and I've sort of understood quite a lot about that with the lovely Rachel McGuinness, who we both know, and and I Matthew Walker, sorry. And yeah, somebody said to me on my podcast recently, you need to read that because then you'll never not sleep after that, because it just scares you too much when you see how important that is. And, you know, when we're stressed and when we're, you know, we haven't got a job or our business isn't running, we think that actually by sleeping less and doing more work, we're going to be more successful. And, you know, I don't think that applies. And he certainly says it doesn't. And then the other thing is that whole sort of mindfulness piece, and whether you call it that or not, how can you take that time for yourself, and what is that stuff that you need to do? So I sing, as you know. Not a great time at the moment. We can't sing in our choirs anymore. But, you know, I sing at home. I found a really cool app, actually. If you're a musician, there's an app called Tom Play, and it's quite new. So there's new music being added all the time, but you can choose your instrument and you can just download music, and it's got all the accompaniments and things like, I play my recorder with it and I can detune it so that my recorder is actually in tune with it, because normally it wouldn't be. And it's got singing and my bassoon and piano and everything. So I play music. That's one of my main things, and sing, to be mindful. Lots of people, you know, do yoga and meditation, and, you know, they, for me, never really floated my boat, as it were. And I read that singing was just as good, which is why I started singing. But if I wasn't singing, I'd be doing those things. And I just think that's so important, that taking that time. And again, you know, it gets pushed, doesn't it? We run out of time to do that. And again, another benefit during, you know, these really challenging times, a lot of people have spent more time with family. Not always in a good not always a good thing, but in lots of cases it has been. You know, I've had my daughter at home and just had such a lovely opportunity to spend more time with her. She's 14, so sometimes obviously it's been a bit stressful as well, but you know, taking those moments and appreciating them, I think, is just a real key part of that too.
And you're not going to be able to keep it up if you're focusing on applying for jobs or your you know, your business every waking hour. There has to be the other stuff built in. I know you were talking about your perfect day, and for a while my perfect day was waking, you know, in my vision was waking up in the morning and having time to do the yoga, or my, you know, good yoga session before I started work. And you know what, there was actually no reason why I couldn't have done that then.
Yes.
But everything else seems so important.
Yes.
So sometimes it's about that is all in the future.
Yeah, that is such a good point, and that's where Power to Live More came from. Remember, it was that bit about we can work as hard as we like now for some future, but, you know, sadly my father-in-law didn't have that future. He worked, and literally almost as soon as he finished working, he got cancer, he died, and, you know, he's gone. And he had so many plans and so many things that he always had loads of activity going on in his life anyway, but for post-retirement, and he didn't get that chance. So, you know, absolutely, it's about knowing what really lights you up now and doing it somehow, somewhere in your life, because, you know, you don't know what's going to happen. So, you know, and you know, it's a sort of virtuous connection, which is when you do those things, it makes all the rest of it so much easier.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. It's a very interesting interview this morning. So Jo, your website is powertolivemore.com.
It is, yes.
All the details will be below the video. So
lovely. Thank you, Paula.